I was excited before I came. I was excited when I got here. But after talking to so many of you yesterday and today, I'm a lot more excited now than when I first came. We've got a little journey over the next 30, maybe 40 minutes. It's going to have kind of three legs for us to talk about. Why Made in America is more than a label. A lot of those have been talked about in different talks over the last few days, but we're going to dive into that. Why now is the right time to reach the American people, and why and how American ranchers must be stewards of our food supply and our country's future. So this photo my wife and I took in D.C., we'll bring it back up. We took in D.C. You're standing on a pond, by a pond near some of the monuments that most people don't see. And right there, there's names of all the signers of the Declaration of Independence. And we took the photo partially when we went because my mom's, I'm trying to think, one of her relatives was one of the signers. And so Made in the USA has been core to who I am, and we'll get into a little bit of that story here. We mentioned a little bit, get the slides up at some point. There we go. The Made in America movement, we went through a little bit of in the bio. It's been around since 2009 and has built a loyal following of 500,000 consumer members. And we'll talk a little bit about how we got connected with RCAF. But I love what RCAF has done, bringing ranchers together and so much of the legislation. We have the voice of the consumers. We have millions of consumers that come to us and ask for not just patriotic posts, but they want education and they want to know brands and how they can make a difference. Last year, because there really wasn't an organization that was out there, we acquired another group called MadeInAmerica.co, which is basically the Amazon for finding American-made brands. The organization, and part of the reason we're in here today, is because we've become the go-to Made in the USA source. Whether it's Fox News or CNN or even radio or the Huffington Post, they come to us now when they need information about Made in the USA and they want to know what that means. Very different viewpoint depending on the news stories that we get, but they're still coming to us. And we've now established kind of that consumer trust so that when I put out an article, like last year I put out an article that was covered by more than 300 local NBC, CBS affiliates. Part of that, though, is from content from organizations like RCAF that we're wanting to help spread the message for, to the point that in 2017, it was mentioned in the bio, that's my head in the little corner there sitting across from President Trump. They reached out to 11 different people and organizations asking who could help put together the first Made in the USA roundtable. And every one of those either named me, Margarita, who started our organization, or the organization itself. And thankfully for me, Margarita doesn't like to do press so much, so I got to help put that together, and we did make sure that she came with us as well. But I never intended to become kind of Mr. Made in America or an expert in American-made businesses. I was raised really to be a leader in business with the work ethic of a farmer, but to succeed in business. I came across the Made in America movement because of a tech company that I founded and that I was building. And frankly, they had a large base of consumer-facing brands to work with, and that's why I started talking to them. But very quickly, as I learned more about their mission and who Margarita was, who started it, my roots kicked in. Because a little bit was mentioned. Also, my father was born in Kimball, South Dakota, where much of our family still ranches in verdigris. Think about how much our country has changed in just such a short amount of time. Now, we've had mail trucks for a long time, but literally my mom's dad delivered mail on horseback. That's crazy to me how much has come across given what I can do on my phone today. And I mentioned a little bit, my mom did keep me up way too late making me do chores. 8 years old, still maintaining farms with her. But one of the things that we get a lot is people come to Made in the USA for a variety of different reasons. A lot of times people come, I think a lot of us that are really in country of origin labeling, we care about jobs, we care about the local issues. A lot of times we come to it from a patriotic purpose as well. That's good. People come for environmental issues. Increasingly, we're seeing actually a lot more consumers come to us because of health issues, and we'll talk a little bit about that. And much more recently, it's a national security issue that consumers are starting to care about. And I would add to this list too, it's a cultural issue. My wife and I have spent a lot of time outside of the country. She lived in China for a year. I built a company there. And Western capitalism built on our democratic republic has raised more people out of poverty than any single innovation or group of innovations in history. And while we don't always see that, that's one of the reasons, that culture issue, that we're seeing more and more people come to us and ask for things. And frankly, why I'm here, not just because I was asked, but because I believe that the American rancher and our food supply, that you guys are stewards that are going to keep these things going, not just for the next 100 years, but also for the next 1,000 years, hopefully. A little bit on our organization. We do put out things that are much more rah-rah. We trademark Made in America is more than a label. My wife can put out this post and it can be shared literally hundreds of thousands of times. We can get comments from tens of thousands of consumers, and that's good. But it's much more than just a rah-rah motivational group. Consumers come to us, and more so because they want to be educated. They actually want to know, how do things like country of origin labeling affect them, which is great to have that stewardship and the voice that we have, because we get to help amplify organizations like RCAF. And actually brands come to us, which is really weird from being in a marketer business perspective. People send us emails and ask us to find more brands that we can talk about that are made in America. Like, I talk to other marketers at conferences, and nobody gets that. Like, wait, some people come to you and say, can you share more denim jeans that are made in America? I would love to share more, but that's actually harder to do than you would think. So we're able to reach millions of people on a monthly basis with that message of Made in America. But really, it's more true in our food supply than in almost anywhere else. And my wife and I, we've been involved in this fight for probably 7, 8 years now that we've been involved. And the food supply really only kicked in with us very recently. And I'll talk a little bit more about kind of that timing. And so now as we talk about why the timing is now, something has changed in the American public. And I believe that the Made in America movement, we were connected with RCAF, and to some degree our ears were open to hear Bill's message, and we were connected to that for a reason. You see, well, I guess one of the questions is, who in here searches for things on Google? Yeah. Even if you don't search for a topic on Google, they're able to see, whether it's Google, Bing, they're able to see where, not just what you search for, when you search, where you go, and even if you go directly to things, you could go to Fox News or CNN, because they run analytics software in the background that all of these brands get because they give it away for free. They're able to see how long do you spend on articles, which products do you go to. So they're able to tell things now, and for the last 10 years or so, about what consumer interest is in a way that was kind of really guessed at even 20 or 30 years ago. It's a little scary, but we can also use that for good, because when organizations like us get a hold of that data, we can tell and we can monitor what consumers think about, because we can see what they care about now and how that changes over time. And the data shows us that we have an opportunity to reach and educate and activate a large portion of the American population that frankly has not existed in the past. So if you guys are okay, I thought I was going to have to ask this question a little more until there was so much data I got in some of the other presentations. But if you're okay with it, we're going to walk through some data on consumer interest for topics like Made in the USA, Made in America, not just in food supply, but across everything, how that compares to more general interest that people have. And we're going to talk about how that data shows us how we can connect with consumers on country of origin labeling for beef, lamb, but for a much broader portion of products as well. So are you guys okay with me taking a few minutes to walk through some data about what consumers think? So this is a little hard for me to follow, at least in some way at first. So interest over time. 100 on the top of this chart always shows consumer peak interest for whatever topics you're looking at. So if I'm looking at the NFL during football season, that's probably pretty high. If I'm looking at Christmas in December, maybe November for kids, that's a lot more important than it is in March or April. So it's important to look at things together. And so Made in the USA, when I think about there's a little bit of, as a marketer or as a business people, we tend to live in our own little myopic small worlds because a lot of us think just like those of us around us. And so one of the things that's made me successful is I've realized that as a marketer and business person, my personal views are never what I should use for my messaging to get out because most consumers don't think like I do. So I need to figure out how does everybody else think. Not just is my view what a lot of people think, but how do I reach other groups as well? So when I look at this, I want to compare country of origin, Made in the USA and Made in America labeling to something the more common, beef. Just a generic topic, of course interesting up here, but this goes back through 2015. And when I compare these two, makes sense. Americans like beef. It's actually really interesting to me that there's some peaks. Around March of every year, it spikes, like compared to the rest of the year. Stuff that's interesting for marketing for them. But what I brought this chart was to show you that consumer interest for Made in the USA and Made in America, not just for food, but for everything, whether it's denim, the boots that I'm wearing, or your car, is minuscule compared to a term like beef. And that kind of bothers me in some way because I live in this world. But if you see this uptick that starts in March of this year, right around COVID, you see that it jumps up. We're going to zoom in on that in just a few minutes because that means that there's good things coming if we, and that includes with RCAF, do our jobs right. But before we can talk about what winning looks like and how to fight and how to change consumers' minds, we have to know our enemy and where we're really starting from. Because it's country of origin labeling is actually a lot worse than this from consumer interest. This is what it looks like when you compare it to some of the much more popular interests that consumers think about. Not just what they search for, but where they spend time, where they talk about. Literally, Google does their trends data so they can tell about what people send emails on and what they receive emails on. So when I compare country of origin interest to things like Netflix or Home Depot, which are these two lower lines, doesn't even register. Facebook's that blue line up top. It's come down over time as other tools that people are of interest, whether it's younger generation or the 50, 60, 70, the population that's growing the fastest on technologies like Instagram. Country of origin labeling doesn't even barely make a blip. I kind of had to fake the data a little bit so I could even show it at 0. That's how small it is. But as I mentioned, my job, why I've been successful, is that I teach brands how to reach millions of consumers. And my experience helping hundreds of companies that sell to consumers and companies that sell to businesses confirms what research says about that data. Because we've done we've done tests talking to consumers directly. So consumers do care about country of origin labeling. The numbers I can talk about for the Made in America movement are crazy for how many consumers come to us and what are engaged. But while they care, they're busy. When things are going really good in the country, they don't care about necessarily where the shirt's made, where their beef comes from necessarily. They're distracted. There's some that would argue, from a politics perspective, there's a large group of people that are trying to keep them distracted, for whatever reasons consumers are. When we talk to consumers about country of origin labeling, whether it's food or clothing, they don't even know what questions to ask. They don't know what questions to ask retailers. They don't know what questions to ask online. They don't know what questions to ask at the grocery store. And they're increasingly told misinformation by much of the media. And that includes social media, but it includes news organizations as well. We're going to talk a little bit about an article my wife wrote on USA Beef and how some of the comments that we've gotten back from that are so factually inaccurate. Most everyone in this room would realize that but those beliefs have been placed in consumers' minds from somewhere. And when we dig into some of those, because we'll message and we learn a lot by one-on-one conversations, oh, I read that on CNN. I heard that from this environmental organization. And there's a fundamental belief by most consumers in America that their food supply is safe and that it will always be safe. Now, not that that's true, but that's what they believe. But that can change. So if I zoom in on just the Made in the USA information and the Made in America information, we can see that the blip really spikes here with COVID. So starting in March, it jumps. And there's some dirty data on here, and I only say that because some of these spikes in green, which is people's interest in Made in America, when we look at the data, you see, oh, there was interest in the past. But it's not actually about country of origin. That big spike back in 2016, there was a documentary on the football player O.J. Simpson that came out and about the murder that he did. It came out in 2016, so the media pushed it. It does show in the data, but it's not relevant to us thinking about country of origin labeling. The other spikes are a music festival that somebody created that happens every year to try to capitalize on, because it's easy marketing, on the term Made in America. So that green line would really be low if we looked at it and I took out that data. But I want to show what's actually there if you look for it. But this is the data we get when we go to an organization like Google Trends. At the Made in America movement, starting in March, we saw a 500% increase in traffic to our main website. It's really a missions-based organization where consumers come to hear. They get some brand information, but it's more about the fight that we've been in legislation. On our madeinamerica.co marketplace, an 825% increase in 1 month when COVID. Why? Because when COVID happened, the countries of India and China that make most of our pharmaceuticals and process most of our generic drugs stated, if things get really bad, we're not going to send those supplies out of the country. And consumers flipped out. We didn't hit 90% carrying, but we've never kind of seen that growth before of interest. And that's something that, while we hate that this pandemic's happened, it's exposed some stuff that we have been learning about, and we think there's a big opportunity for all of us to take advantage of, and why now is the time. Because if I look at another data set, this is, again, where Valerie and we live, is in Made in American country of origin labeling across all products. The next closest spike we see, if I go back all the way to 2013 of consumer interest in this, is right about September 11th, again, when consumers were scared. So we've used that as a reason to dig into and have more discussions. And frankly, we kind of opened up our ears as well. And so part of what I've been able to do with so much from a business perspective is I can call friends that are economists, I can call people who manage large funds, and I can ask them what they're thinking and what their data shows. So from talking with economists, anthropologists, historians, all of the data from everybody I talk to says that consumer interest in Made in USA and country of origin labeling for those in the United States has not been this high since World War II. While the data we see from Google shows people's interest from searching and where they're spending time, when you actually go in and you look at other sources and you talk to consumers and you look at where their concerns are, they may not know what questions to ask. They don't know that their beef, it doesn't come from the USA. They don't even know, most people don't think you can buy clothes that are made in the USA. So they don't search for it, but they're asking questions that shows that they care and they're wondering how we got to this place. So this starts a few critical years where we can act on kind of the fear and the sensitivity that consumers have right now. Because I love the work that RCAF has done for years from a legislation perspective, what's going through now from a legal perspective and fighting cases. But politicians are not going to act unless consumers care. And you see from the data, consumers largely don't care. That's up to us to change, to awaken and activate the silent majority in the United States. And I believe that we as individuals have a responsibility, and not just to help our own individual businesses and make sure that we have legacies that we can hand off to family, but I believe that that's the only way that we're actually going to save and protect our country. Because country of origin labeling really affects our food supply, but it affects everything. The good thing is, it's one message that if we get right, as both our organizations, we all win. So let me tell you just a little bit about our experience educating Americans on American-produced beef. This is something that RCAF has been attempting to do. And frankly, we've been on calls. It took probably 2 years for Margarita, maybe a year for Margarita that runs our organization, founded it, to get me on the calls that happen once a month with Bill and others from other organizations that talk about the legislation. And some big brands like Maglite and other brands that come on as well. But something clicked for me and Valerie where we finally heard Bill when we were on calls. And my wife Valerie, who runs marketing and brand for us, started asking questions. I kind of joke to people, Valerie knows more about Made in USA labeling and the regulations than actually anybody at the FTC that I've ever spoken to or that we've connected to. She knows what it says that much more. She knows there's gray areas. I quoted some of the issues that she had when I've been at the White House. So she spoke to Candace and did a ton of research, and then Valerie did what she does very well. She started asking, did you know questions of our community, of our friends, of our family. And we did that online, and we did that in person. And we learned things. We learned that while, kind of mentioned before in the data, while we think about country of origin every day, even Valerie and I, we're considered experts on country of origin labeling when you talk to the broader society. 11 out of 11 people and organizations the White House went to named us to come and talk to. And yet we didn't think about it related to our food supply. And I think, as I mentioned, I think about it in my jeans, my boots, my laptops, but I hadn't thought about it for my food. And so if I don't get it, what would consumers get? So when Valerie started asking questions and started educating, largely, I mean, Valerie's great at distilling information, but from Bill and from Candace, we got information. Valerie wrote a great blog that also pointed to the same thing that RCAF is doing, getting consumer signatures. And we found out across the board from tens of thousands of consumers, almost 100% believe that USDA means made in the USA. I'm not sure we actually found anybody, but I'll say almost 100 just in case we did. We found that consumers care about country of origin labeling. We have to seed them and help them with questions, but when we start pointing out to things, we'll talk about in this next section about how we can change the conversation, consumers care. They don't care a little, they care a lot. I can hit very progressive people on the left, and I can hit conservatives. And again, depending on what you know to ask, consumers are shocked to learn about human trafficking, environmental damage, and the treatment of animals in countries that send beef to the US. Some of that is things that happen in Canada. But it's also, my wife and I are very involved in the End It movement, which works on human trafficking and sex slavery. We live in Atlanta, one of the pretty much the capital in the US for sex trafficking. Most people are shocked at that. Country of origin labeling helps the End It movement and other organizations to fight that worldwide. Consumers, that's how we reach another group. So, into that kind of third section, how do we fight? You guys have mentioned it so far. This is what RCAF has believed. This is what I've increasingly believed as I've gotten much more into country of origin labeling from a food perspective, but that the rancher is our steward for our food supply, and not just today, but for the future. So this is a picture from a small ranch by our family land in North Georgia, in Blairsville, Georgia, for those that are from the area. And so we see this when we're out of our main house, and we love it. But as I look at the data, and I've gotten to know so many of you before this as well, but especially while we're here, and I look at the graph that Bill put together that has been shown many times already in the last couple of days, this actually makes me tired. I mean, it does. I can only imagine what it feels like to have been in RCAF, to have been Bill for so long and the team fighting on this. Because, you know, consumers, as we've seen, are open to action. But when I look at this and I think about if I had been fighting within RCAF for so long, I would be tired. It took years, decades, to get country of origin labeling passed. And then in the 5 years since it's largely been overturned, I mean, I've been hearing the behind the scenes, you know, there on these legislation calls. I'm glad that there are some people that are of interest to it, but there's not been a lot of support. And so, like even this morning at the prayer breakfast, when Max talked about his grandfather working on legislation 100 years ago, I got more tired. The data makes me encouraged, but I don't want to pass over that. I mean, from a disheartening perspective, I've just barely gotten into this. I can't imagine that this had been my family's legacy. So I said, the good thing, though, is consumers are interested and they're open. They're open to learning about food. They're open to learning about other products. We tend to deal much more with manufacturing. And so this next little bit, I'm going to talk through some of the things that I've seen that we've taken from other consumer brands that have sold hundreds of millions and billions of dollars of revenue that I think really will help us get the message out here. I'm just going to gloss over some of these, but being here is actually part of what we're hoping will be a partnership between our organization and RCAF going forward. There's a lot that we can't do by ourselves, and there's a lot that RCAF can't do by itself as well. So we're going to just touch on some of the things, but not just things that the organizations can do, but things that we as individuals can do, because that's how much messaging actually gets out nowadays. Because, as I said, it's not just what will happen today, it's going to be what happens in the future. So it's fine to know how we got here, it's fine to know what consumers think, but it's the how. That's the big thing. RCAF's been fighting. Frankly, the Made in America movement fought for many years, from 2009 until 8 or 9 years ago, when really my wife Valerie got involved, and we've stayed in the fight. That how matters. Valerie's taught that organization how. So who wants to talk about how we can change consumers' thinking? We okay with that? A little positivity after where they're actually at? So there are 4 big things that come up and that we've seen, not just with the little dabbling we've done in Cool for food, but across the board about when we talk to consumers. And it's kind of, to me, a lot of marketing, a lot of being prepared to be able to reach when we're trying to do a movement, which is what we're all doing, is much like if I'm trying to share the gospel. It's great when people come out, when a preacher comes out and they just walk through pure scripture. But you know questions are going to come up from non-believers, especially those that weren't raised in faith. How could God allow bad things to happen to people? How could he allow cancer to kill a 5-year-old? How could he allow this, that, something else? Lots of those questions that we're actually called within the Bible to be prepared for. It's the same thing when you're trying to move a mission and you're trying to get millions of consumers to either wake up to a message that they don't care about, or you're trying to convince them. In this case, we're trying to convince them about something that's good. But there are 4 big things and a couple of small ones that really come out for most of these conversations that we've seen connect. I'm sure this isn't all of them, and I don't have all of the answers for how to best sell them. Mentioned before, jobs. That's why the Made in America movement got its largest amount of people early on, was jobs and patriotism. It's a great story. We were in some of the discussions in the hallway, but it's connecting data that makes it easy. Not just that, hey, what was the term, 72 or 76 regional packaging plants got shut down, they got bought out with price gouging. That's great. Tracking that through and making it easy for consumers to understand, what is that, how does that affect? These 72 plants led to what? Well, it meant the person who services the tractor, the person who sold the tractor, the people who work at the grocery stores, the restaurants we go to. We can make that easy and a distinct message that we can take to consumers when it comes up. And that reaches a big group of people. And just like kind of with faith, a lot of times people will go through an evolution of what they're asking and how they ask it. Protecting our global environment. I know there's a lot of environmental regulations that come in a lot of times in the States and they interfere with our businesses, and there's an overstep and it hurts property rights. But when you look at environmental issues that happen in other countries, it's very different than those of us that are stewards that are on family land or working on a small bit of land where if we ruin the land, it doesn't exist for us to be able to ranch on or to farm on in 10 years. That's not the same case in Brazil. That's not the same case in South Africa. Not the case. It's not that all the countries are bad, but consumers care about this. And so I mentioned that I've worked in China. Like, this is less more on the manufacturing side, but how we've seen Connect is, my first time in China, we'd started a joint venture. That company, if you have a navigation system in your car, we created the data globally for it, much larger than even Google Maps is today. And I'm in Shanghai, and I'm walking with one of my now good friends who works there, and the path that walks along this river that goes along in downtown Shanghai, a city of 26 million people. It's about 50 feet from the water. I live in the country. I like outdoors. I've been in big buildings, so I start walking closer. About 40 feet away, my friend Darwin stops. I get about 20 feet away, and Darwin hollers at me to stop. Makes me come back to him so that we can talk. He's like, I've never been this close to the water, and proceeds to tell me about how toxic it is. That he was concerned, whether rightly or wrongly, that the water in a river in one of the largest cities in the world was so toxic that he was questioned whether he would actually live if it touched his skin. Maybe it's that polluted, maybe it's not. But that's a level of pollution that's nothing like anything that would happen in the United States. So this is another topic that when we have stories and we actually know what happens, it connects with a large amount of people. I have friends that are way on the left politically. We can talk about political things, manufacturing. They never cared about where their clothes were made before. They never cared, is Apple going to move an iPhone manufacturing facility back to the States? You bring this up, they care. They may not be on our side fully, but they care enough to learn more. There's another big group of people that just care about making wise health choices. So in the last 10 to 15 years, there's been a lot of medical research that shows what we feed our animals affects the inflammation response in our bodies. I can talk to friends that are deeply into keto and fasting and things and bring this topic up. We found in the US beef side, they care. We touched it, but not nearly as much as I've learned in the last few days about the hormones that can be used in Mexico and steroids that can't be used here and what that could do. Again, being prepared for topics that go out and reach consumers in the communities that they're in for the topics that is true, but that will trigger them to care. And then I mentioned national security. I'm still not sure exactly how we can best try to reach consumers with this, but because we've seen it be such a triggering event for our larger Made in the USA organization from September 11th and with COVID, I know there's something here from my experience in business. We just have to figure out together what are those talking points that are going to connect with consumers. But there are others that I mentioned. I mentioned ending slavery and underage labor around the world. And if you think about manufacturing in China, we're not talking about kids working in our own businesses and on our land. It's something much different. Cultivating true freedom and personal freedom in developing countries. I mentioned a little bit about what Western capitalism has done. Frankly, from a country of origin perspective, we've seen that having that discussion, usually after somebody's involved a little more, they will very much choose products that are made in Northern America than they would in South America, definitely over much of Asia. And so being prepared to have talking points so that consumers realize, this actually does not just affect me, but when I buy something, I'm investing in that local place. And really, fair trade practices and competition. There's another big group of people that's why they come to country of origin labeling. They want to know what we know in this room about the percentage and the money that's kept by the big multinational packers, and how that does not flow to go help other producers and even other countries or producers here. That's a fair trade issue. And when we can talk to consumers about that in distinct snippets, they care. And that's one of the ways that we win. And we'd like to help RCAF with some of those messaging and take some of the education that we've heard here, and we hope to continue to get from the group. And we hope to take that to the consumers that we talk to and help to train you guys to speak that as well. But it really comes down to us as individuals choosing to learn new skills. Modern marketing. I know there's a lot, we're busy. I've heard from some people, it's like, I'm already so busy, I'm overloaded with the work that we do already, I can't learn something else. But this isn't necessarily anything different than most of us do today. It's a term called influencer marketing. I mean, our whole lives we've seen celebrities promote products. That's great, they have wonderful visibility. Did you guys know that in the US, hundreds of millions of dollars is spent every year now convincing those of us in this room, those of us with audiences from 50 to 500 to 1,000 people even, to promote their brands. Sometimes you see them as reward programs. Somebody Cabela's is great for giving away free things, but they literally go out to activate what they call micro-influencers and nano-influencers. It's the people that you think about when you know somebody at church and they bring up a topic that maybe you don't care about. You care because you have personal equity in that person, so you engage in a conversation. When we talk to friends that come over for dinner, when you see somebody at the hardware store, that's influencer marketing. And it's being cognizant of literally the influence that each of us has as individuals. Brands do this, but successful organizations that are shaping consumers do this very well. And on the left, political organizations have been really good at activating the influence of a lot of their people, and we haven't. Another thing that we get to do is we learn new skills to engage. Who here has seen one of these videos from RCAF? Okay. Who here has left a comment on one of them? Okay, less hands. I bet if I asked these specific videos, it would be way less. And I can see that from the data. So underneath in both of these, and I've been watching these, Bill, these are great. But when I watched these, just 4 weeks ago on the one, almost 3,000 people watched it. They didn't watch it all the way through, but 3,000 people watched some portion of it. 62 people reacted to it on Facebook. 5 people commented. We had more views on the other video that had more of a panel. Great to be doing these. Most organizations do not do this. But there's a huge opportunity here for RCAF to share the message, because I'm going to let you in on a secret that marketers know, and Facebook knows, but like 99.9% of consumers do not know. The vast majority of people on Facebook don't know this. So the 3,000 people that watched the video with just Bill by himself, think about this from Facebook's perspective. Their entire business is keeping you as a consumer on their platform more. Their competitors are not necessarily Twitter. It's Netflix, it's TV, it's movies. They want you to show you content that you will engage with, that you will share, that will keep other people involved. So they have an algorithm, a calculation that when we do things, it decides to show it to more people. So in the case of RCAF has 18,000 followers or likes on Facebook. Bill puts out that video. It might send a notification to 100 people. If people engage or don't engage, it will choose to show it to 100 more or 1,000. And there's a ranking of these things. A comment is the most important thing to Facebook's algorithm today. So literally, when Bill pops up on a weekly address, if you just comment, I'm watching from Roswell, Georgia, I'm watching from such and such ranch, Facebook knows that that's a trigger to their algorithm that says, people love this, they're talking about it. Some cases, they'll read what you actually say. So by all means, as he's giving an address, as they're doing something, comment back, feel free to leave a comment on something that they're speaking about. Next would be liking or commenting, and then sharing that as well. You can think about that as, one, we're gaming Facebook a little bit, but marketers know this. We train influencers to do this, and it can be as simple as, I'm watching from Roswell, Georgia. That's huge. Doesn't feel natural to a lot of people. It doesn't feel natural to a lot of people in our community. We're still trying to get them to do it. So this is what's worked for our organization a little bit. Whenever you comment to like a weekly address or any post that they have, think about it as a donation. Because you could have given $5 and they could have donated, or you can help it just show more. But we can also just share about life. We have to learn to share content that's also not just about country of origin labeling, check off, or our day-to-day life. I think about this. We have one friend who's a mortgage broker. He turns away business. He gets more referral business than you can imagine because he's really active on social. And not all of us in this room are going to do this. But every once in a while, he posts a picture of, hey, here's the family I just helped refi their mortgage. But he also does things like he popped up and he helped somebody, was helping somebody get a mortgage because they had been recently incarcerated. And he didn't share personal information, but he just told the story of, wow, here's somebody who I really feel from a grace perspective has changed, and I went through to get the information to do their work, and where have you lived for the last 2 years? And it's like, well, for the last 3 months I've lived here, and then before that I was in prison. He's like, I've been doing this for 20, 30 years. I've never experienced this. And it was a little bit just of that heart connection and what that was going to look like. I actually watched the whole 15 minutes because it was interesting. It was a personal story, reminding me that he's a mortgage broker. Then when there's things in the community, especially with COVID, where can you get food, where can you not, he posts things, not about his business, but it reminds me of who he is, so then I care about when he talks about his actually business. So even if like sharing things like that doesn't seem natural, sometimes we have things that are funny that happen. Has anybody in here seen this video on Facebook? I see a couple hands. So this is Valerie's cousin and their little boy. Scott Clark dared his young boy to go $20 if he would go jump on the back of that steer. We all live on ranches. You know what's safe and not. This was safe. It's funny. It's only 19 seconds long. I'll give you a link at the end if you haven't seen it so you can watch the video. It throws him a good ways. But he goes out and they even talk about it's not safe. It's hysterical. Like 2 million views in the first 24 hours or something. Somebody then took it illegally, but they posted on YouTube, and it went from and that posting not by them, 360,000 people. This also reminded everybody, it would also just kind of remind people, one, it's funny, but of what Summer and Clark do for their life. It also helps them to share more things. So I just kind of encourage you, one, things like this are funny, but to share things that you might not otherwise do, where you feel comfortable doing it. Other things that we can learn is how to reach politicians. Lobbying is important. However, today, Washington state governments, they generally don't care unless people do. So I know you guys are doing signatures for things, both online, some print. If we're not digitally inclined, because that's much of my world, work with people that are. And it's literally just getting 10 more people to get involved in something. It takes effort, but it's there. Because everybody here, we've been hearing stories. People from in their 70s to in their 30s that are ranching. And everybody I've spoken to has something to give, and it's more of just figuring out what that is, asking for help, people like us, or others within RCAF, and trying things, some of which are going to work and some aren't. Summer and Scott share videos that some do really well like that, and most don't. But it's trying things. Outside of modern marketing and some of those things, as we're kind of wrapping up, learning to partner with other organizations. As I mentioned, we're hoping with the Made in America movement that this is going to be the start of something much larger that we'll be able to do. But I think together, we may do this as individual organizations as well, but together we will be able to extend into organizations like Young Republicans, Talking Point USA, and others with much larger reaches than even we have. And we can come with a combined effort and also target them from different parts of our society and expand our reach, because some of those have come to us asking for content. So we actually would love to share more of your stories, because that gives us fresh content to share as well. But I mentioned like the End It movement. I don't know if it makes sense to talk to them because they fight human trafficking and sex slavery. Is there something there to connect with on cool and other things? Maybe, but it's worth at least a conversation for us to have and see if we can figure something out. Convincing others to fight. I've spoken to a number of people here where I've been asking this question: do you know somebody who ranches that is not in RCAF? I got yes, or I got I don't know. I don't think I got anybody that says everybody I know in my community is in RCAF. It's just like sharing the gospel. It's asking questions that start conversations and continuing to come back in that. And so this is an easy way to both expand the reach of RCAF from a membership, but also to extend the reach that we have then for each of our influences, if we could double the size of the organization. I even kind of bring that up in a little bit of a self-serving way, because most of the people that I've spoken to here had never heard of the Made in America movement today or before my name came up. We think we're pretty big. It's also very humbling whenever I talk to a group of hundreds or 1,000 people that don't know who we are. And it also shows me how much more of a reach that we have to do. So that's something that we're trying to teach, our 500,000 people to be very active in, to engage in those conversations. Came up a lot in stewardship in the next generation. It's intentionally raising the next generation. We heard from several of the families that were up here. It doesn't have to be just the people that are running the ranch to be helping with the messaging here. In many cases, it takes those of us that go out and do other things to share the message and to bring new tools back that can benefit the RCAF and the American Ranchers thing. And really, because if we don't teach them also as consumers why this is important, this is going to, the American Rancher could die out, but we're at the critical point where everything that I've seen, every business that I've been part of, we had a lot of indications about whether something can succeed or not. And consumers want this information. They literally just don't know how to ask the information and get involved. So that's part of why I'm here, because I said the future depends on our actions today. We can do this together. I'm confident of that. I'm happy if anybody has questions to answer questions, but I know a lot of this information as well, it may take a little bit of time to sit as well. So if you have questions, I'm happy to take them. I'm also happy, though, if you go to kurtuhlir.com/RCAF, one, if you want to know more about what we do with the Made in America movement, sign up for newsletter. I'm happy to tell you that. But I have a form on there. One, I'd love to know how this information connects with you. But I have some specific questions on there if you have ideas about some of the things I spoke about here where you think either it could connect with consumers in a different way. But I also have a question. I want to know how you think we can work with RCAF more, both as an organization, but as individuals. My wife Valerie has been filming and doing interviews with a number of you already. We're going to push that out and publish that. But I'm sure there's ideas in this room that will be great ideas for helping consumers and helping us get out our shared mission that we have not thought of and that you will. So literally, it's just a simple form to fill out. And if you have any questions, I'm happy to take them.